Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my presentation, Aquaponics, how to use it as an educational tool. My name is Laura Tew, and I am a University of Florida IFAS Sea Grant Marine agent up in the Panhandle, and I serve in both Okaloosa and Walton counties. While currently most of my job involves coastal education, I do have over 30 years of aquaculture experience and over 10 years using aquaponics as well. I certainly do not consider myself an expert, but I know several people who are, and so I feel like I can be somewhat helpful in people who are especially just getting started in aquaponics. You can see here I am up here in the Choctawhatchee Basin area of the Panhandle. And I just want to start out by thanking all of the teachers here today because I've worked with teachers for a large part of my career, and I always appreciate those teachers that are willing to do something extra and go out on a limb for their students, and using aquaculture and aquaponics in the classroom certainly falls in that category. So this is only a 30-minute presentation, so we're not going to be able to delve heavily into aquaponics. It's going to be a good overview, and I'm going to leave you with some resources to continue your research. So what is aquaponics? It's basically a self-watering loop. It's a closed loop system that uses the effluent from the fish. You feed the fish here. It uses the effluent in a recirculating system to provide nutrients for the plants, and this is done through a bacterial process called nitrification. So basically we're looking at three different systems here. We're looking at the fish system, the plant system, and then the bacterial colony that exists throughout the system for the nitrification process. Some people call this the hybridization of aquaculture and hydroponics. You're learning a lot about aquaculture this week. That's the fish component, and hydroponics is what we refer to for the plant component and the nutrients that go through this soilless system. How it works, again, just a little bit of repeat, but the fish right here are fed some kind of food, and they produce ammonia. They excrete ammonia over their gills and in their urine and waste products. But ammonia, unfortunately, as you're learning, is highly toxic to fish. So throughout the system, you have this bacteria that exists on all the surfaces in the system and in your biofilter, which will convert that ammonia first into nitrite and then into nitrate, which is what the plants use as one of their essential nutrients, one of their 16 essential nutrients. So the plants will remove the nitrate from the water, using it for growth and basically cleaning the water for the fish, and the water is returned back into the fish tank. This whole process is driven by oxygen, so it's important to have oxygen in your system for both the fish and the plants. So why do we look at aquaponics as a way to grow food? Well, it's very sustainable and natural. It's free of all pesticides, herbicides, and any kind of chemical fertilizer, because you can't put anything in the system that's going to harm the fish. It is very highly efficient and very conservative use of the resources in terms of water, space, and labor. You can put aquaponics in an area where you don't have the land or the soil for more traditional agriculture. The biggest benefit I see is that it produces both a protein and a vegetable crop from one system. Here you see a typical catfish dinner, so you could actually produce this catfish right here. You could grow cucumbers and make these pickles, and you could definitely grow lettuce and tomatoes in your aquaculture, in your aquaponic system. So you could actually make a fish sandwich, except for the bread part of it. And it is continuous production of food all year round, especially if you have a climate-controlled facility. So a lot of benefits to using aquaponics in general to grow food, and specifically in the classroom. So why do we look at aquaponics as an educational tool? I have through K through 12 here, but of course in college as well. It's very hands-on and interactive. So this really lends itself to STEM applications. Of course, throughout the process, you learn a lot of biology because you have to know a lot about the fish, the microbiology with the bacteria that do the nitrification process. And then, of course, the plants as well, all the different kinds of plants that you're going to raise and what their requirements are. Then there's the technology. You can get into monitoring probes that will monitor the water quality 24/7, the use of spreadsheets to basically look and analyze that data, and all the other equipment that you can have on these systems, biofilters, oxygen meters, different things like that. Engineering also is a little bit in the system building, maintenance and construction. I really like programs that can allow the students to construct the systems, because I really believe by constructing the system yourself, you learn the system from the bottom up. And of course, a lot of math in these systems, figuring out fish densities, feed conversions, volume of the tanks, how much water is actually in your system, how fast your fish are growing. So a lot of mathematical applications here. Water quality monitoring is very important to the system, and one of the hands-on activities that the kids really like to do. So we monitor for oxygen, temperature, pH, ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, and alkalinity specifically. There are some others you can do. And I think it exposes students to career opportunities. Maybe they want a career where they can grow food, or they want to learn more about food safety or animal production. So lots of opportunities here in the classroom using aquaponics. So how do you get started? We're lucky that you're surrounded this week by a lot of experts, both from the Florida Department of Agriculture and University of Florida Tropical Aquaculture Lab. And they both have a lot of good resources that they make available to you. I really like the FDACS website, where they have a lot of aquaculture publications, and they walk you through the process of what it takes to get into aquaculture. And I also like their information that they have there on aquaponics, and I'm sure you'll be learning a lot from them today. This is a system that I visited over in Tallahassee that was just an outdoor greenhouse. You can see it's one of the chop and flip IBC tote systems, which we'll be talking about in a little bit later. They used a gravel and seeded right in the gravel. So these are just some pictures of some different techniques of aquaponics that you might see out there in the industry. The third party to get support from is definitely your school administration. Over the years, the most common question I get from administration is, does this smell? I think people think, especially if it's going to be an indoor system within a classroom or in a spare classroom, that the fish might produce an odor. Another thing you need to consider is some schools have regulations about eating produce and fish out of the system. So you need to make sure if this is part of your plan, that you check all the regulations and requirements associated with actually consuming the products that come from your system. Remember, this is a long-term commitment. It's not really a get STEM quick project. It's going to be something you're devoted to for several years. Here are the main system considerations you need to think about when you're getting started. First, you need to think about size. And there's several different sizes. You can go with something small like this with an existing aquarium. This is simply an aquarium with a Rubbermaid tote and a homemade float bed on top, where you could grow some herbs, which would really be nice. You can go medium, like those IBC totes that we saw, or there's a very famous barrelponics document that I'll be sharing with you, where you can use these blue barrels to build a system, and I like that as well. Or you can go larger, where you actually maybe get a grant to invest in some tanks, fiberglass or plastic tanks, and you could even go up to a commercial made type system. You're going to see different culture techniques, deep water or float beds. These styrofoam seedling trays are floating in float beds. Media beds, which is where you use hydroton or an expanded clay, gravel, or lava rock. These blue barrels are filled with that type of lava rock. You'll also see in some of the coming pictures nutrient film technique or a gutter system. And then you also have Dutch buckets, which are like 5-gallon buckets, or towers that even go vertically. So there's a lot of different systems that you can choose from, but they all have very similar components. They typically involve a fish tank, a water pump, an air pump, some kind of plant trough or hydroponic system with baskets, styrofoam, or media. Of course, you're going to need some tubing and PVC, some type of filtration system to remove the solids and serve as a biofilter, the fish, the plants, and then grow lights and heaters course optional depending on what your goals are. This is a slide of the small system that I've built here at our extension office. These were all things that I could either buy from Tractor Supply, Lowe's, or order easily on Amazon. So this is my system components. I started with a 300-gallon Rubbermaid watering tank. Then I use a 20-gallon trash can for my biofilter. I have it stuffed with bird feed netting so that it captures any solids, and then I have a little valve here at the bottom where I can remove the solids and use those to irrigate other plants in the greenhouse. These are actually feeding troughs you can get at Tractor Supply. I have 2 of these that I use for float beds, and then all the water goes down into a 50-gallon Rubbermaid tote. This is our sump. Then there's a small water pump, a sump pump inside of here, and it's pumped back through a garden hose back into the fish tank. So it's all fairly simple. The system is up on cinder blocks so that it gravity feeds down and only has 1 pump in the sump to run the entire system. I do have oxygen both here in the fish tank and in the float beds to make sure I have plenty of oxygen in my system to drive that nitrification process. It's all connected with PVC pipes and fittings. I use uniseals on any openings for easy access. I do have a 1/4 horsepower sump pump, the garden hose. I had to buy fish and feed, some styrofoam from Lowe's for floats, plant baskets and water quality kits, some miscellaneous tools, some silicone, and some rat poison because we had a little rat that liked living in our greenhouse at the time. So my whole system came to a grand total of about $1,500, and I've been running it for over 4 years now. Fish considerations. Tilapia, of course, is your most popular up here, but other fish are too. For example, in Florida, for hobby scale production, tilapia is prohibited by Fish and Wildlife and FDACS, and this is because they don't want them escaping into our fresh waters up here. They're already pretty much throughout the peninsula, so tilapia some species of tilapia are allowed there. You just have to check the regulations with FWC and FDACS. I know there's also some exemptions for educational facilities, so you can check with them on the regulations, but make sure that you're getting a fish that matches your area. For example, since I'm in the Panhandle and tilapia is prohibited for most of my clients, I use catfish in my system, but I've visited a lot of systems that also use koi for the people who have no intention of eating their fish. I've seen bluegill in systems, and since you're at the Tropical Aquaculture Lab, I've seen small systems that have been powered by small tropical fish that would work as well if you were doing something small in the classroom. There's a few things you want to think about. First off, if you're going to be doing a project where you plan to market these fish, you need to look at potential markets before you decide which fish. But one of the most important things is the availability of fingerlings. While there are a lot of fish farms in Florida, they may not be near you. And so it can be difficult sometimes to actually buy and transport fingerlings to your facility. So something that you can get the closest to you and be able to talk to that fish farmer about what kind of feed they use and how they raise their fish, and have fingerlings available throughout the year if you need to restock for any reasons is very important. That's another reason I use catfish. I have 2 catfish farms near me where I can easily get fingerlings. Same with the availability of feed. I am just using a feed that's regularly available from the Tractor Supply Company. Because I have a catfish, it's a fish that can survive easily with a low protein feed, and all of these are available through my Tractor Supply. You can also order higher quality feeds on Amazon.com if you like. You want to make sure your fish species is compatible with your plants in terms of pH and temperature. We're going to look at that at this next slide. And then feed and heating considerations. For example, you don't want to raise trout in a system in Florida where you would have to constantly be cooling that water because trout like water temperatures down in the 50s. Or you don't want to raise tilapia in Alaska where tilapia like temperatures up in the 85 and 90, and you're constantly having to heat that water. So pick something that kind of fits with your environment. Your stocking density is going to be determined by how many plants you decide to raise. The plants is really the the biggest output from your system, you get a lot of plants with very little fish. So you determine your plant density, and then you work backwards to determine your stocking density. And a lot of the resources that we have for you today will help you do that. We really recommend not exceeding 1/3 of a pound per gallon of water, and that is total system water. That keeps your fish at a very low density and will eliminate a lot of the problems. My fish are much less, and my system is about 1,000 gallons total, and I only raise about 25 to 30 pounds of fish in it, so very low percentage of fish, but it raises a lot of plants. Fish health is imperative, so it's very important to buy healthy fish from a known source, and if they eat nice high quality food, they'll stay safe. Some people like to have 2 tanks of fish so they can rotate small fish in with larger fish. As they harvest fish out of the system, they can put more fish in, so that would be optimal. I don't have that luxury. I just have 1 tank. And I also sometimes get asked about mixing species, like would you put catfish and tilapia in the same tank? And I always tell people to be cautious about that, because fish do have different requirements, and they do have different niches that they like to inhabit in a tank. And by mixing, you're just kind of introducing another layer of complication. So I don't recommend it, but it has been done before. Plant considerations. I think everybody should grow basil, because basil is actually such an aquaponics loving plant. It grows in every aquaponics system, and it grows well. So if you like pesto, and this is something you want to make with your students, start out growing basil. The leafy greens, like these lettuces you see down here, also do very well in these systems. They are much less finicky than when you start getting to the fruiting crops, like your tomatoes, peppers, snap peas. All plants require 16 essential nutrients, but some of the fruiting plants need a little bit of additional supplementation in these systems. So again, it adds that little bit of layer of complexity. Not terrible, but I really recommend starting out leafy greens. This one's nice, has some rosemary, some rainbow Swiss chard, and then any of the leafy lettuces. I grow a lot of bok choy and pak choy for stir fries as well. You're going to find that your plants have a shortened growing time in your aquaponics system. What might take you 8 weeks outside in a regular traditional garden might only take 6 weeks in aquaponics. So the plants are going to grow quickly. That hydroponic float board in most of these systems, or in the gutter systems, if you have the NFT, you can see there's a lot of surface area here for the bacteria to cling to. And so this whole, all the surface area in your float troughs and underneath your floats also acts as a biofilter. There's a film on all the surfaces where that nitrification process will occur. So we do like to keep oxygen underneath the plants in these systems here. Plants also require light, so you're either going to have natural light, like you would see in a greenhouse, or you're going to have to provide artificial light inside. And the consideration there is the extra electricity that would take. Water temperature, we always say optimum around 75, but you'll see a lot of variation. And then as far as measuring water quality, we need you to test pH every week because the system will become more acidic over time, and you can buffer with potassium and calcium to get to the desired pH. But water quality is really the key to these systems. You can see this is a nice school system we had in Ohio, had some tilapia under here, went up, this is butter crunch lettuce here, and then there were other media beds on the side, and then all the water floats back into the fish tank at the bottom. Most people like to have a water quality test kit like this, which just has some drops, some very simple tests that you can do. People that have more money can get some meters like this dissolved oxygen meter from Yellow Springs Instrument Company. But it's very important that you're measuring all of these parameters with temperature, pH, alkalinity, dissolved oxygen. Well, we want temperature, oxygen, and pH daily, and then looking at ammonia, nitrite, and nitrates once the system is established 2 to 3 times a week. And then monthly, check out that alkalinity, hardness, and the carbon dioxide, just to make sure that all your parameters are optimum for your fish and plant. So this is a very interesting chart, because this kind of shows you What makes aquaponics a little bit more complex than aquaculture? And it's because you're trying to find a balance between what the plants need, what the bacteria need, and what the fish need, those three components of the life components of the system. So here you have plants, and warm weather plants do well from 70 degrees Fahrenheit up to 85. Your cooler weather plants, like your lettuces, they need it a little bit cooler. Your bacteria that you're trying to grow in your system so that you can convert that ammonia to nitrate also have different requirements. Nitrosomonas, which is the bacteria that converts ammonia to nitrite, is a much more tolerant of wider temperature swings and easier to get established than Nitrobacter, which is the bacteria that then will convert the nitrite to the nitrate that the plants will need to uptake. So you can see it's going to be a little bit harder to get this bacteria colony to colonize in your system. All these fish have different requirements. You have bluegill, channel catfish can take a little bit more heat, as well as tilapia, with largemouth bass or maybe goldfish and koi can tolerate your cooler temperatures, maybe during the wintertime. So when you draw a line down the middle, you'll see that if you keep your system at about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, you're kind of hitting within the range of each of these different live requirements for your system. And so you don't want your system to get too hot. That may be good for some of your fish and your bacteria, but not for your plants. Or if you get too cold, it may be good for your plants and some of your fish, but not your bacteria. So this is why we try to keep a good balance in the system. The same issue comes with the pH of the system. We all know a neutral pH is 7. Plants actually perform best at around 6.5 to 7, while your bacteria perform best around a pH of 7.5, and most of your fish like it between 7 and 8. So again, we kind of draw that line down the middle where we can hit a little bit of everybody. So if you keep your pH between 6.5 and 7.5, you're hopefully going to hit a lot of the parameters that these live parts of your system need. The very first thing you need to think about is breaking in your system, and this is where we see a lot of failures in aquaponics. This is Trader Hills Farm, one of the large commercial aquaponics farms that we have here in Florida. Breaking in your system takes a long time, and this is where people get impatient. It usually takes 6 to 10 weeks. We have some great resources out there, including the SRAC document of multiple methods, describing multiple methods to do this for your system. The most required thing is patience and testing that water quality. Because once you put your plants in, as your plants grow, they may not need many nutrients in the very beginning, but it's going to increase substantially as those plants grow. And that Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter community, it's non-existent at first, and it develops slowly. And again, we saw in those previous two slides, very dependent on the pH and the temperature. In our experience, nearly 90% of all fish problems and mortalities occur in this period because the ammonia and nitrites will kill the fish, and that nitrobacter that you need to convert that nitrite to nitrate, that final step, takes the longest to kick in. So you're going to be expecting wild swings during that period of time. You have to monitor things very closely and don't push your system. Very low fish feeding, low amounts of fish until your system gets established. After that, I say that a system, even a small hobby system, takes a good year before it's fully established. And then you will be amazed in years 2, 3, and 4 to see what you can produce even out of a small system. Just going to go through a couple examples of some students that I've worked with here in Florida. This was a Northwest Florida State College freshman Capstone Project a young lady did. She was studying aquaponics and designed and built her own system. You can see she has a Rubbermaid tote behind her here where the fish were. The water is pumped up into a bucket that she used as a biofilter, and then it gravity feeds down into 2 half barrels filled with the expanded clay balls, and she's growing a few plants in here, and then she has drains on them, and when the water level hits a certain when the water hits a certain level within these media beds, it'll activate these drains and drain back down into the fish tank. So that was the kind of neat project she did. I also work with Silver Sand School in Fort Walton Beach. They got some funding for this greenhouse and had a contractor bring in this system. It's not my favorite system because you're raising the fish. You can actually raise a large amount of fish in this type of system, and then they really didn't have a lot of plant area. But they had two different systems. This is the NFT or the gutter system that you can see, which is really nice for raising especially like butter crunch lettuces, things like that. And then it also hooked into this floor size float bed system where you could grow a lot on these wrasse. They do have this up and running now, but I don't have any current pictures. It's another school that I work with, Westonwood Ranch, which is a training facility for young autistic adults. They have a very nice system growing catfish in these blue tanks right here. The filtration system is outside of the greenhouse, and then the water comes back in and goes through these two long, wide float beds, and they grow some beautiful butter crunch lettuce and other lettuces in there. So they're doing very well. They have local distribution. They have a lettuce club, and the students help market, pick, plant, do everything basically with the lettuce. So it's a pretty neat operation. This is my system right here. Remember, you saw the slide earlier about my components. So if you look at them in practice here, you'll see this is my 300-gallon fish tank. I keep shade cloth over it to reduce the amount of algae that I get in this tank, and plus catfish like it dark. So it kind of keeps my catfish cool and low stress. The water gravity flows out of this tank upflows into this garbage can, which is stuffed with bird netting, and then I remove solids here, also acting as a biofilter. It then gravity flows into these two long feeding troughs, which I use. You can see I've got styrofoam floating in there. This was a summer picture where I had a lot of tomatoes growing in the system, and I also had some sugar snap peas, and then I had lettuce along the bottom. This is more of a winter picture where I've got some basil here. I have some lettuces, some cool water lettuces. Again, a lot of bok choy and pak choy. And these are the catfish that I grow in my system. And I get them at about 4 inches, and then I grow them up to about 1.5 pounds when they are harvested. This is another small system that I inherited, one of those blue barrel media systems, and I've grown some turmeric and other plants, some pepper plants in here. I have some issues because my greenhouse gets really hot, and so this blue barrel right here, even if I only put in 1 or 2 fish, they're always just kind of stressed out and they don't eat well for me. So I need to think about what I'm going to do with this system. It's just a little bit too small for my greenhouse for the temperatures that I have in there. It heats up too quickly. So basically, that's an overview of different systems and how you might use aquaponics in the classroom. This is a neat system at a facility near here called Cold Water Gardens, where they do a lot of organic food production and aquaponic production in these large gravel beds that we have. One of my favorite resources, and something that I'll be providing for you, a link, is this FAO small scale aquaponic food production. If you are new to aquaponics and you read this document, here's the link right here, and it will be provided in as well. If you read this book, it basically tells you what you need to know about designing systems, building systems, and then growing system. I think it's a very well done document. It's a great starter document, and highly recommend it. You'll feel much more confident after reading that. You can also join our listserv. It's called Pan Aqua. All you need to do is email me and I can put you on there. I don't send out a lot of information, but maybe once, 2, 3 times a month I'll send out an email for any webinars or training opportunities that might be out there, or even systems for sale, things like that. Just a way to kind of create a community of practice in our area. But just encourage you all to network with each other, find support. You've got great support there with the people from FDACS and Tropical Aquaculture Lab. They really know their stuff, and you can count on us from IFAS Sea Grant to be your partner as you explore this as well. So here's my email, lgtiu@ufl.edu, and my cell phone. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help. And again, send me a quick email if you'd like to be added to our listserv. Thank you so much for your time and attention today, and I hope to meet some of you in the future.